Welcome to The Decision from Nashville EO, where you will hear the rest of the story after tough decisions were made by entrepreneurs who faced adversity and lived to tell about it.
Welcome to The Decision by EO Nashville. We are a podcast by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs. We talk about the decisions that we make in the heat of battle. And with me, as always, today is my sidekick and partner in crime, Mr. Robert Hartline.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Eric Jackson.
Glad to be here again. And today I'm really excited for our guest today because I consider her a dear friend and a breakfast mate.
Yes.
Sherry Deutschmann, longtime EO member.
Yay.
Thank you for being here.
I'm thrilled to be here. I kept wondering when you were going to ask me. Hoping.
Well, I talk about you on a regular basis because I have shared one of your business secrets that we'll probably get into later that you have shared openly and that I think is a big win for entrepreneurs, especially those who want to get more out of their employees and have the employees get more out of the experience of working together. So with that, let's dive into your story.
Okay.
Robert, I know you've got a question chambered.
Oh, well, so first off, what got you to Nashville? Because like a lot of people, they come here for one reason.
Well, it's embarrassing, but I thought I was a singer.
Oh, I did not know this.
Yeah. I had met a really famous, at that time, entertainer of the year, and he heard me sing and set up appointments with me at RCA, and at that time, RCA was the big dog in town, and I came to town to get a record deal. And I was here about 3 weeks when I realized that I did not have the talent. I was terrified by real talent, and so had to make a living doing other things.
You know, that's not an awful long time, to try it out. But was it humbling that you saw talent that was just unbelievable? Did that really shock you as a young woman?
The Bluebird Cafe had just opened. And at that time, there was no cover charge. They would allow me, I had no money. So they would allow me and my daughter, who was 3 at the time, to come in for the early show, get a glass of water, and listen to real musicians. I mean, that's where I heard Garth Brooks for the first time and Kevin Welch and singers of that ilk, and I knew I didn't have the goods. So it was very humbling, and I have, at that time especially, terrible stage fright. And I would just, tremble. I was on the TV show You Can Be a Star. Do you remember that show?
No, I don't.
It was like a precursor to The Voice and American Idol. And I came in 3rd place in a show that had 3 contestants.
Okay.
So I came in dead last and still thought I had the goods until I started hanging out at the Bluebird and gave up on that dream pretty quickly.
Right. So what did that feel like? So was it job hunting time? Is that what happened?
Well, I was a single mom. I had just gone through a divorce. I was very young, very naive. I had only high school education. I had no money. I had no skills. The only work I had done was scrubbing toilets. I had a route in North Carolina where my sister and I cleaned all the gas station bathrooms. Not a very glamorous job. And I'll have to tell you that women are dirtier than men. That I had a few, wealthy families that lived on Beach Mountain that I cleaned house for, and that's how I made a living. And so I wasn't really very well prepared. When I got here, I had less than $200 to my name and a kid to take care of. So the first couple of years in Nashville were pretty scary. I got a job at Beeman Lincoln Mercury selling cars.
On West End?
Well, at that time, it was on 8th Avenue South.
Oh, wow.
And I went there because I had a Volkswagen Rabbit diesel that had tumbled off a mountain, and I bought it for $1. And it was in really, really bad shape. And so I knew I needed a better car to drive, and I'd heard that car dealerships would give you a free demo to drive. and that you didn't need training, you didn't need an education. And so I went down, knocked on the door, and told the guy I want a sales job. He said, "Well, what do you know about cars?" I'm like, "Not very much." And he said, "Well, what do you drive?"
Oh no! Oh no!
That was really an oh shit moment. So I pointed out the window to my car, and he was like, "Oh my gosh!" And he said, "This is a really tough business, filled with rejection. Can you handle rejection?" And I laughed and said, "Yes." And he said, "Why did you laugh? What makes you say you can handle rejection?" And I was like, "Well, I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness. I've been knocking on doors since I was about this tall." Wow. And he did that. He laughed out loud and he said, "Okay, you got the job."
That's terrific.
Yeah,
and he said, "I'm going to give you the job on one condition." And I was like, "Yes, sir," whatever. And he said, "Promise me you will never park that piece of shit car on this lot again." So you're supposed to sell 6 cars before you got a demo. But at the end of the first week, I still hadn't sold anything. And he said, "I can't take it anymore. Go get yourself a car." So
Wow.
That was my first job in Nashville.
Mm-hmm. So you learned the ropes on sales well before the car dealership, though.
Yes, yeah. Really. Being a Jehovah's Witness, I mean, you knock on doors. Living in the mountains of North Carolina, there were the bougie people who had their fancy chalets on top of the mountain as their second or third or fourth home, mm-hmm. and then there were the people who still didn't have indoor plumbing, and there's still some of those who exist.
Right.
And so we called on every door regardless. And so you learn to adapt your message. Mm-hmm. And it was being a Jehovah's Witness raised that way was actually a very good training ground for sales.
Yeah. Door to door. That's where it's at.
Yes.
Now, when did you get into entrepreneurship?
By accident. I didn't even know that word until I was working for an entrepreneur, and he still calls it entrepreneur, which I don't get, but
entrap, I can get that because it is a trap sometimes.
That's how he pronounces it. So I was working for him and just didn't like the way he did business. I was responsible for sales, so I brought in 100% of the revenue for that company.
What kind of company was it?
It was exactly what I did with LetterLogic, which was in the healthcare revenue cycle. So we printed and mailed hospital bills. So I was selling to big hospital systems all across the nation, and I would sell a new account, and we would lose 2 accounts because our service was so poor. So I just observed that the reason our service was poor was because my coworkers didn't care. Oh. And the reason they didn't care, it was because they knew nobody cared about them. And I had just read that book, Nuts, about how Herb Kelleher started Southwest Airlines with his belief that if I just take great care of the flight attendants and the pilots and the baggage handlers, they're going to be happy and they're going to take care of the passengers. And so I ran to my boss and said, "Hey, I've got a way. I figured this out, how we can stop losing customers." And he patted me on the hand and said, "You don't know anything about business. Why don't you just go sell something?" And so I quit. And I had gone from, in the first couple of years I lived in Nashville, it was such a struggle that I often had no electricity for days at a time because I couldn't afford the daycare bill and the light bill. And I had gone from that to making 6 figures. I owned a house. I'd gone from that dollar car to a Jaguar. And yet I didn't like the way they were doing business. And I walked out that door and never walked back in. And
was that easy for you?
Incredibly easy, because I was an idiot and did not know. I did not know what I didn't know.
Right.
I didn't know how hard it was to start a business. But what he didn't know that was that about 2 weeks before that, one of the most powerful men in this area had invited me to lunch. And he said, "I've been watching you and that company, and I think you should leave them and start your own business. And I will back you." and we will compete with them. And that was a pretty heady experience for this girl with no education. And he has the Midas touch. He's a billionaire. And so when he made me his offer, a term sheet, which, I'd never seen anything like that before, he was so generously offering me a salary of $35,000, and I could earn up to 5% of the company. And even with my high school math, I didn't think that was a good deal for me. So I said no. But the fact that he thought I could do it was so heady. And so that just planted a seed. And so I went to 5 different customers, not all customers, 3 customers and 2 other people in Nashville, and said, I need $350,000 to start this business, competing with that company. And all 5 of them said yes.
Wow.
And yet, when I told them what I wanted to do, they were like, oh, well, that's not going to work, but we can do this. So I just said no to all of them. And by that time, I had a 401k, and I'd saved up a little money, and I'd bought a few houses. I was flipping houses nights and weekends.
Oh, wow.
And so I just put it all on the market. Had a week-long yard sale. I lived at 4018 Leland Lane, and my neighbors, I'm sure, still hate me for a week-long yard sale where I sold everything I owned and cashed in the 401k and got together just enough money, I thought, to get us going. Didn't even have a desk at that point. I had a bed, and at that time, my granddaughter was living with me, and I had her crib and a table. So I went to Goodwill and bought 2 of those little short filing cabinets and an old door, pulled that over that, and that was my desk. The company that I had left had given me my old laptop because they didn't think it was worth anything. And I had a landline and a whiteboard, and I set up shop in my basement, competing with them. Right next to the washer and dryer. Very convenient. And decided I didn't want to be anything like them.
Now, let me ask a real question. When your boss told you knew nothing about business, was that light under you? Did that just light you up?
It did.
It just did that statement just drive you?
It did. He had an MBA from Vanderbilt, and so high IQ but no EQ. And I realized that all of our problems were people related. The mistakes that we were making that were causing us to lose customers were just human error. And it was all about the people. And I thought, well, I know you've got that degree, but I know things you don't know. And it did. It lit a fire under me.
Yeah. Are you thankful?
Oh, so grateful for how he treated me.
Yeah. I mean, some of the worst experiences are the best for us.
Well, it informed me of how I believe I was an ideal employee. I was so dedicated to that company. I was a straight commission sales rep, but nights and weekends, I was there cleaning the bathrooms. I laid all the tile in the IT department. I would go and, pull the weeds, clean the trash. I did all of that because I cared so much about the company.
Do you think, had he treated you with more respect without making those statements, that you could have possibly stayed and entrepreneurship never would have happened?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because it was really a catalyst.
Yeah.
And for me, it was the realization that I'm responsible for all the revenue. And at that time, there was about $15 million a year. And look at how he's treating me. The people that are down on the floor, and we had a glass wall where we could look down into the factory where they were working. How did they feel? How marginalized did they feel if I feel this way and I'm vice president and, bringing in all the money?
So when did you discover EO?
I think Wade Miller was my friend at the prior company, and he was a member, and he kept trying to get me in for like 5 years. And I'm like, Wade, I do not have time for that. And so finally, just to shut him up, I joined. And
What year was this?
Probably 2010. Or 2009, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And I joined at the same time also a WPO, the Women's Presidents Organization, which is very much the same criteria and the peer learning kind of thing. I joined both.
And what did you get immediately getting into the community?
The bond and the acceptance and the knowledge that they were on the same path as me, that they understood my struggles. I loved, the educational aspects of it. I didn't stay in very long. I think it was less than a year, though, because I was just so busy and the company was growing like crazy. By that time, I think we were at like 15 million in annual revenue. So we grew very quickly.
Oh, wow.
We were on the Inc. 5,000 list for 10 straight years.
Oh, wow.
So there's a lot of fast growth. And
you obviously had explosive growth.
Yes.
Talk about how that happened. Obviously, you learned some things from your previous employer about how to treat people. And I take it that you took that to heart and you implemented these things.
He gave me a PhD in how not to treat people.
Yeah.
So seeing that most of our problems were simple human error, thought, how do I avoid that? And I knew that I had to make it so that every person that worked there had a vested interest in the outcomes daily. And they had to not have the struggles that I had where in the early days where I couldn't afford to pay the light bill. I had to take care of all their basic needs so that when they were at work, they could focus on taking great care of the customer. So when I talked about having those investors who wanted to support the company, when I told them these things, they were like, oh no, because I said, I want to pay for 100% of everybody's health insurance. I want to pay a real fair living wage. I want to help them buy their first homes. And they were like, oh, no, that's not how you start a business. But that is how we started our business.
Wow.
And then with the single best idea I've ever had in my entire life, I came up with a very unique profit sharing plan, unlike any other in the nation, in which every month I brought all the employees together, shared the P&L with them, so they saw exactly how much money we took in and exactly how much money we had left at the end, how much profit there was. And then we talked about the results. And if we had a great month, we knew it was because we all did exactly what we were supposed to do. And when we had a less than stellar month, we just talked about it openly. Well, we screwed that up and we didn't do a great job on that. And so everybody could understand their part in the bottom line. And then whatever the bottom line was, regardless, we took 10% of it and distributed it evenly at that meeting so that our janitor got exactly the same thing I got. And that made everybody care about the bottom line and made them think differently. It made them behave differently because they benefited. And so I think it's why we were able to grow to $40 million a year with no debt, with we very seldom lost a customer because our service was extraordinary. And we were the most expensive in the nation.
Wow.
And I would tell clients right off the bat when we were pitching to them, I need you to know we're the most expensive in the nation. And I do not believe the customer comes first. And they would look at me like you just looked at me, like, what did she just say?
Yeah.
And then I explained to them, my employees come first. They always will. But I take such good care of them that they're able to focus on you in a way that you'll never experience customer service like you're going to get. And Stanford University Medical Center wrote us a letter when they chose us and said, you were 10% higher than the next highest bid, and yet we chose you because of your culture. And it became our number one sales tool, the culture.
Wow.
And it wasn't just talk, it was real and palpable.
Yeah.
Visitors talked about they could go into our lobby and feel it, the deep engagement of every employee.
So Sherry, tell me about a time when things were not going great.
With a bunch.
Yeah, with the business, and maybe a story of maybe a challenge or decision you were struggling with, and you maybe brought it to form, and you couldn't decide how to navigate that decision.
Well, in my first stint in EO, I don't think I encountered any of those things in Forum. I was like cooking with gas.
Everything was working.
Everything was working. And then when we got to maybe 30 million in revenue, I was on several boards. I was a member of EO and WPO. I had way too much on my plate, and I just dropped out of everything, even paid bank board positions. I just dropped out and said, I'm going to add back in only what I have to have. And I felt like for a year, I just got my life back. No meetings, no prep for meetings, no follow-up for meetings. And then when my company was for sale, so in 2016, I decided to sell LetterLogic. And all of the bids to buy my company, we had seven entities competing to buy us, were supposed to be in by Friday. And the first one came in on a Sunday night. And on Monday morning of this process, one of my employees, my most trusted, most beloved, most respected by all employees, did what I felt was a deep betrayal. And I reacted in a very egotistical way. And then his ego got involved. And before I knew it, I had myself in a situation that was untenable. And this happened in the space of like 16 minutes, where this thing escalated to where I knew it could cause the whole cell to crash. I could have my entire leadership team walk out to follow him. So I left the office to go to a meeting at Music City Center. And I was invited there. I don't know who the speaker was. And as often I share that had it been Ryan Gosling on the stage naked, I would not have known. And I love him.
Oh, wow.
Because I was so upset. And so I whispered to the banker and said, I have to leave. I've got a crisis at work. I shouldn't even be here. And he just said, okay. Then I whispered to the man on my right, who happened to be Derek Bell, who's in an EO forum and a friend. And I told him what had happened. And he whispers back to me, holy shit, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know. And he said, call your forum. And I said, I don't have a forum. I dropped out a couple of years ago. And he said, well, that was stupid. and he said, hold on a minute. And I'm like, what? And he said, hold on. And he starts texting madly. And he says, go home. My forum is coming to your house right now to help you with this. So I wasn't even in EO.
Wow.
And his forum dropped what they were doing, all of them, and came to my house. And we did what we do.
Right.
You lay the problem out. They ask clarifying questions. And the thing was, none of them had experienced exactly what I had experienced that day. But all of them had had an existential crisis in their business. And all of them had had some story about betrayal by a spouse or a business partner or an employee. And so those are the stories they shared with me. And I think they were with me maybe 2 hours that day. And I left knowing I had to take 2 actions. One was to fire this beloved employee. And 2, I had to rejoin EO because I never wanted to be without my forum again.
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that nobody in that forum had an experience exactly like what you were experiencing, because I know that personally when I'm in forum and I'm listening to a fellow EO forum member talk about their decision that they have to make, like I don't have anything that matches that, but it doesn't have to match it. It just has to be in the neighborhood.
Yeah. And it's really when it's important to tie into the emotions
Yes.
that you're feeling.
Yes.
And I think we often forget that in EO, like to start with the emotions so that we can figure out where you are, because that's what they tapped into,
Right.
the emotion of betrayal that I was feeling.
Yeah.
And they came with the stories.
Yeah. That emotion, okay, we can all connect to emotion. We've all experienced those emotions before.
Yes.
And so that's what brings us into that same realm with whoever is presenting.
And regardless of what the problem is.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's the most of the time, the heart of the emotion is the heart of the decision that you have to actually do. And you have to navigate that. Like, where is that feeling coming from? And then beyond that feeling, because that's the root. Like, we get to the root, then we can go, all right, let's make a decision. Because we can often get misdirected with the wrong feeling, not asking the right questions.
Yeah. And especially with betrayal, and then the ego gets involved, and it's like you're ready to go stabby on somebody. At least I am. Well, the
right
redneck comes out of me.
Me too. Well, right after that, somebody gave me the book "Ego is the Enemy."
Yeah.
And
Ryan Holiday.
I've only read it like 20 times.
Oh gosh. Wow. Yeah.
But it was ego that day, because without giving away too much, because he's a man I respect so greatly. With the first offer that came in, he was excited about the first offer, and I wasn't. And so he, determined that I wasn't going to sell the company, and told the other executive leaders that she's not going to sell. She wasn't excited about this offer, and he in front of them. And so my ego was like exploded. And I said, oh, if you think that's a good offer, I'll buy you out today at that valuation, because they all had equity. And he said, I'll take that offer.
Wow.
And I didn't have the money to pay him. And then that wasn't enough for me to throw my ego out that way. Then I had to be even that much worse and tell the rest of them, and if y'all think that's a good offer and you want to go with him, you can go.
Oh my God.
Hit the road, Jack.
You've got till 9 a.m. tomorrow to tell me. Goodbye. And I left. And so I just created a much bigger problem for myself.
Yeah.
So it was his ego first and then mine. And then I'm happy to say he and I are still very close friends.
I wonder, like, if in hindsight, you can go back, we can always, go back and replay that event. Selling your business, not anything you're ready for.
No.
Ever. And it's not like, I used to do role practice with my sales team, getting prepared for almost any situation. But we don't role practice what's going to be like when you get an offer. This offer is now going to include this or this clause or this thing. And like, you don't know how to navigate that. So there is no practice. So your emotions are already high because, it's a great offer. What am I going to do next? And all these questions. And then we forget the team that got us there and how to navigate them. Yeah. Because we're the ones that's sitting on our shoulders, but they put the work in. They sacrifice. And then you want to make them whole. You want to give them exactly what they signed up for. And is there any advice you would have given yourself knowing that, or giving someone else that would be in a sale? Like, how to navigate that sensitive time in your life when And it all comes down to all those years of work is coming down to a deal, the last deal.
Yeah, I would probably advise everybody to read that book, Ego is the Enemy, before you go into any of these situations, because lowball offers, affect your ego. And when people they want the team, but they don't want you, or whatever the deal might be, ego is very wrapped up in the sale of a company. And so I think it's really good to review all that. With this particular team, when I went back in the next morning and said, okay, who's staying, who's going? They all said, we're staying. And I was like, phew. Because he was so fantastic. He still is the most brilliant man I know on the planet. And he had helped us quadruple EBITDA in 18 months. And we all bowed when he walked into the room.
Yeah.
And yet we got much better offers. And so that first offer we rejected, it wasn't bad. It just wasn't great. And if they had left that day, they would have each gotten $250, but instead they each got $750.
Wow.
And so I think they were glad that they waited 3 more days.
Wow. It's all perspective.
Yeah.
And you can see how someone would jump at the chance, because that's a lot of money.
Yeah. And they were all very young, and they all had just a little bit of equity, but enough to $750,000 when you're 35 years old is a big deal.
Oh yeah. Wow.
I'd like to have it now.
I wouldn't turn it down.
So here's a question. What do you offer as some wisdom to a new EO member that joins our organization to get the most out of the experience?
I would advise them to do what I'm doing now in BrainTrust, which is be as honest and as vulnerable as you can be. And the way we're doing that in this organization is when you come to your monthly meeting, you share with everybody your revenue from the previous month to the penny. So there's no posturing and there's no BS. You can't pretend you're doing great, and you can't pretend you're not doing great because you feel bad that everybody else is not doing so well. And so you're kind of naked in front of everybody, and that brings a different level of humility and accountability to the group. And I would say as soon as you can get raw and honest with your group, the better on everything. Because they can't help you get where you want to go if they don't know where you really are.
Yeah.
So quit pretending. I'm surprised at how often people say, well, I was intimidated by the other people in my forum. And the truth is, we're all intimidated. We all we know that somebody around that table is better than we are at more than one thing, probably. Mm-hmm. But we bring something unique too, or we wouldn't be at that table. And so I just advise them to let go of your ego, be honest, humble, and then you'll get the greatest value.
So here's a question that a lot of people want to know. When you sell a business, what was it like for Sherry to have sold the business? What was it like?
Very sad.
Yeah.
Makes me emotional now.
Yeah.
I wasn't prepared for it to be sad. I remembered I had one investor, and he had invested originally $350,000. And then all in, he was about $850,000. And I was able to hand him a check for millions and millions of dollars as I was crying. And he said, this cures a whole lot of sad. It doesn't really. I went back to visit a few times because I announced to the company on a Monday that the company had been sold, and the following Monday was my last day with them. And it was such a sweet week. I called everybody in one by one and said, if I gave you $10,000 today, what would you do with it? and just let them tell me, oh, I'll pay off a student loan. I'd buy a boat. I would put on a new roof. And then depending on how long they had been with me, I was able to say, well, here's $70,000.
Oh, wow.
Or here's $250,000. And so I gave 15% of the sales price back to the employees.
Wow.
And in a way that was really in sync with our whole culture of, really taking care of them. And the best reaction was one guy who said, I'm going to call and break up with my girlfriend right now, and I'm going to buy a boat. And he did.
That is a great story. I did not know that part of your story, Sherry.
The best day of my professional history was 2 weeks after I sold the company. A young woman, she was 26 years old, came to take me to lunch to tell me what she did with her money. And so she had saved up all of her profit sharing checks. She hadn't spent them. And then she'd only been with us a short time. So I think she got like $36,000. And she had paid off her parents' mortgage.
Wow.
And she said they were Serbian refugees, and she had heard them talking about how, the mortgage was keeping them from sending more money back to Serbia, where they had 17 relatives living in one apartment together. And so she paid off their mortgage, and she said, which is why it was so compelling, that it was working in this company. I never would have thought of this before, but the empathy that is so ingrained in us here is what led me to look at my parents' plight and do that with my money.
Wow.
Isn't that awesome?
Wow. What a wonderful story. Sherry, thank you for joining us here. If you are in Nashville, you're an entrepreneur, maybe you're in a bit of a struggle, and maybe you're struggling with a decision. Think about EO Nashville and how we could help support your journey of entrepreneurship or just going through life. Come visit us at eonashville.com. We'd love to have a conversation with you. Thanks for watching and have a fantastic day.
Thanks for listening to the Decision Podcast by Nashville EO. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.